Today we get to talk with Joshua Spodek. I was super excited to jump into this conversation because Joshua is an adjunct professor at NYU. He's a leadership coach and a workshop leader for Columbia Business School. He's a columnist for Inc. magazine, founder of Spodek Academy, and he authored the book Leadership Step by Step. Now, normally I don't flat out read someone's biography verbatim on this part of the show, but you guys have to listen to this. He has led seminars in leadership, entrepreneurship, creativity, and sales at Harvard, Princeton, MIT, INSEAD in Singapore, the New York Academy of Science, and in private corporations. He holds 5 Ivy League degrees, including a PhD in astrophysics and an MBA, and studied under a Nobel Prize winner. He's helped build an X-ray observational satellite for NASA, co-founded and led as CEO or COO for several ventures, and he holds 6 patents. That is definitely a mouthful. He earned praise as best and brightest in Esquire magazine's Genius issue. He earned astrophysicist turned new media whiz by NBC, and ABC News calls him a rocket scientist and has been quoted and profiled by all of the big media outlets. He's visited North Korea twice, swam across the Hudson River, and has done burpees every day for 6 years and counting. So you're gonna need to buckle up for this conversation because Joshua and I jump directly into the deep water of asking the question, how do we change the world as leaders? We discuss why facts don't help, why guilt is not the answer, and why authoritarianism is equally ineffective for changing the world. Speaking of authoritarianism, we also got to talk a little bit about his experiences in North Korea and how important discipline is to someone who values freedom like he and I both do. Before we jump into his conversation, I want to remind you about the Barenaked Bravery challenges that are coming up very soon. If you want to jump in on those, go to barenakedbravery.com/challenge. And if you want to find out more about Joshua Spodek, you can go to the show notes for this episode. Okay, let's get into the conversation with Joshua Spodek. You're listening to Barenaked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of Barenaked Bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle is Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together.
Were you around when the song came out? I mean, it was huge. It was like...
You said it was in 1980?
I don't think it was as early as 80. It was...
Because I was born in
mid-80s.
86.
Yeah, so it was... I don't think since 86 there's been a song that's hit like that. I mean, maybe like Gangnam Style, but it was a different world. You know, it was... Now, Gangnam Style was big, but in the midst of many channels and media and so forth. Then there was radio, and that's it. And it was everywhere.
It's kind of a crazy thought that something with that message, we are the world, would have such a huge appeal.
Well, people were dying in Ethiopia. That was
Right.
front page news for a long time. And then there was the European one. Do they know it's Christmas time? That'll feed the world.
Oh, yeah.
Let them know it's Christmas. So that came out before. And then this one like one-upped it. And it was Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson and like Michael Jackson's pretty big. And then you had like secondary people were like Bruce Springsteen.
Well, it's fascinating because what we're really talking about is how the virality of culture leads people and changes them, right? And now...
Not virality. I mean, it wasn't viral then. There was no viral, because viral is like, you have to have a social media. It was a selfless...
Well, you can still have viral word of mouth.
Yeah, okay, it was that. It was also just, there was no way to escape it. I mean, there was only radio. MTV, I guess, was around.
Well, either way, it's still fascinating. So Joshua Spodek is here with us, and we are chatting about how the song We Are the World got so big. And I'm curious to you, we were talking before we started recording, I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit more about some of this like discomfort, comfort stuff that you led us to talking about We Are the World?
Well, what got us talking about We Are the World was that I just happened to see the video. Actually, someone on Twitter followed me, and I linked to her profile linked to the We Are the World video. I am 45, so We Are the World came out when I was a teenager, and it was huge. Now, I haven't seen it in decades. So, I mean, it's probably been 10 years since I've heard the song. I don't know, a long time. And a big thing that's been on my mind for a while is the environment. So now I'm changing the subject, but we're going to come back to We Are the World in a minute. Actually, people are probably making the connection. But what I talked about was how people my age and older, when they hear about the sea levels are rising, there's going to be catastrophe, you know, it's not here yet, but in 2050, all these problems are going to happen. So someone who was born 10 years before me, they think to themselves, let's see, I was born in the 60s, 2050, I'll be something like 90 years old. Whew, that was close. I was worried I was going to have a real disaster there, but I'm going to die beforehand, and too bad for the people after me. And people after us, people younger than me are like, wait a minute, I didn't do that. I didn't make the world this way, and now I got to deal with this. There's another calculation that I think a lot of people do, which is, it comes in many forms, but the one I just mentioned to you is, it's a hot summer day. If you turn on the air conditioner, you'll be comfortable. And if you don't, you won't. And so everyone says, well, not everyone, most people think, well, I'll be comfortable. End of story. Why would I have to worry about anything else? But some people think, well, I hear that air conditioners use a lot of energy, and that's going to burn some coal, and maybe that's going to cause some of this global warming that people keep talking about. Maybe I shouldn't do it. And then they think, well, if I don't turn it on, I'll be uncomfortable. But if a billion other people don't do their part, it won't make a difference. So I might as well do it. And so everyone using some kind of similar argument ends up turning on the air conditioner, flying around the world, you know, doing their thing, buying the thing that they don't need, eating the stuff that they, you know, more than they need to. And so we're all doing this, right? And so there's a lot of people who want to help others consume less, pollute less.
So then the next question is, so if you are somebody who wants to create change or wants to inspire someone to do something that's a little bit uncomfortable, either be brave or recycle more often or turn off their air conditioning, how can you prompt someone to do that?
All right, first I got to tell you some things that I think are counterproductive, ineffective.
Okay. I'm writing them down, by the way.
Okay. One is giving people a bunch of facts. Facts don't change behavior. I mean, they may, but they generally don't. I mean, we as a nation know more about nutrition than any place ever, and anytime ever, any place. And we're really not that healthy. I mean, the diseases that we have are diseases of excess. We know not to do it. We know the facts. That doesn't change behavior. Another thing is to make people feel guilty. Guilt generally, and guilt generally leads people to push back. It makes people resist. Another is to change laws without popular support, which is, in a word, authoritarian. I mean, for that matter, it's not practical, because politicians in democracies, we call them leaders, but they tend to follow. They go where the votes are. And if you don't have the votes, a politician who tries to pass a law, no matter how right they think it is, if people don't support it, they push back on it. And so people who actually might support it, if it's imposed on them, might say, I don't want to do this just because I don't like being forced to do stuff.
Not only is it ineffective, but if you're enacting a law without popular support, then you have to enforce that law, and it costs you more to enforce the law, especially if the law is not supported with the rest of the people.
Exactly. And the crazy thing is that most people really do want to change their behavior. I mean, they don't know how, and they feel like, see, if they're told to do it, they feel like, I don't want to do what that person tells me, especially if that person is trying to make me feel guilty or whatever. And the big example I think of is Martin Luther King. He got people to do things that very few people are like, I would like to be put in jail. I would like the police to hit me on the head with their batons. I would like dogs to attack me while fire hoses are shooting at me. But Martin Luther King did not get people to do things that he wanted them to do. He got them to do things that they wanted to do. He showed them how it could be effective. It's a kind of interesting twist to think, I will create freedom, justice, equality by going to jail. But that's how nonviolent civil disobedience works. He was able to show them, yes, what it looks like from the outside may not look like what you want to do, like you don't like getting put in jail. But if you do it, people are going to say, we put someone in jail for sitting at a lunch counter? That doesn't make sense. We got to change that law. So what it looks like to the naked eye, it looks like they're going to jail. But if you look at their hearts, what they're doing is creating freedom and justice.
Well, and it's because you're thinking long game. You're not thinking short game of the immediate consequences of, oh, I'm sitting at an ice cream bar and I'm not supposed to be here. You're thinking long game, like I'll sit here because ultimately I want my kids to sit here.
Yes. And yeah, there's no reason why they shouldn't. And if you read his letter from Birmingham jail and you look at what he wrote about people telling their child, you can't go to this thing because it's for whites only or something like that. And you know that he's not talking about people, he's talking about him and his daughter. And you're like, this is heartbreaking. I mean, look, this is me decades later. I'm not even close to knowing what it feels like. I don't have any kids. I don't know what it's like to look in your daughter's eye and say things like that. But even without that, I can still see it. And he gave them a path to achieve what they wanted that they wouldn't have had otherwise. You know, I had a friend who, this was a couple of years ago, he was like, we were hanging out and he goes, Josh, I got to run. I got to go do this thing downtown. So he runs and goes to this thing downtown. And a little while later, I connect the dots. And I was like, a week after this interaction, I see Occupy Wall Street is starting to pick up in Manhattan. And I go, that time we went downtown, were you related to the stuff that's on the news? And he goes, yeah, I'm one of the people who started that stuff. And I thought, oh, this is really cool because I study and teach leadership. So I say, there's real opportunity for leadership stuff here. And he goes, no. That is not what we're about. Not leadership. This is a grassroots thing that's going to pick up, and it's communal effort, and we're not picking out leaders. And I was like, all right. I mean, you know what's going on, and I don't. And this may be an oversimplification, but I feel like it didn't seem to reach its potential. And I think that leadership is essential to get groups like that to really take off. And I look at environmental action and I see virtually no leadership in getting people to see that they can behave in ways certainly a lot easier than getting put in jail and getting hit on the head by the police with a baton. Certainly eating a little less meat is like not as bad as that, even for the people who love meat the most, or not flying sometime. And I think that leadership is lacking there. And here's the thing.
Let me ask you this. Okay, so let's just hypothetically say that I have family members who don't recycle.
Uh-huh.
How can I not be authoritarian, not guilt them, and not just spew facts on them about why they should recycle?
All right, now it's going to be hard for me. All right, I wrote a book called Leadership Step by Step, which is the answer to this question. And one thing I've learned in teaching this stuff for years now with hundreds of students going through is that if I tell you the answer, it's nowhere near as effective as you experiencing leadership practices on your own and seeing what works and what doesn't work. Just like people can't see that I'm looking at you and we're on video and I can see that there's a piano, an electric keyboard there. And if I tell you a bunch of musical theory, it will not register with you nearly as much as if I give you some scales and you play the scales and you practice and you learn, and you will get the musical theory if I give you exercises that are based in theory. If I tell you how to move your fingers to play a piece, will that help you play the piece?
Nope.
Yeah, and so if I answer your question, here's the answer to the question. is behave and communicate in ways so that people feel comfortable sharing with you what does motivate them in this area. Or simply put, go where they are, go to their space. Now connect what matters to them to the behavior to the tasks that you have at hand, to the projects you want them to do. That will make the project feel meaningful to them. And they will do it for themselves, not for you. Mm-hmm. If you impose your motivations on them without recognizing, without them sharing what motivations they have, they're going to push back and feel like, you don't get me. You don't understand me. If you don't understand me, why should I listen to you? Something like that. It depends on the person.
This answer is the exact reason why I prefer to offer my marketing clients bravery lessons as opposed to, here, let me just give you the answers for the best way to do XYZ. Because walking them through the application process, and really what it ends up doing is that they end up feeling like the education or the experience has been completely customized to them.
More than customized. Yeah, I mean, that's the way to put it.
Because I'm taking my information, I'm taking my expertise, and I'm putting it in a package that fits their precise needs. And the same thing happens when I teach cello lessons. Every lesson is a little different, but I'm teaching the same stuff to all my students, but every lesson is a little different because I'm meeting the student where they are at when they walk in the door, as opposed to having expectations that they have practiced 18 hours in the last week, right?
See, what you're saying you're doing is the tip of the iceberg of what you're actually doing. I'm going to tell you stuff that I bet shows up in your sales copy. I hope it does.
Please, blow my mind. Yes.
Our educational system, it's really about intellectual learning facts, learning recall. And that's important. It's good to know facts. It's good to know dates and things like that. Increasingly valuable in our world is social and emotional skills. And you cannot lecture social and emotional skills into someone. It just doesn't work. No amount of reading will get you integrity. No amount of listening to a lecture will get you initiative and responsibility. These things have to come through your behavior. Everyone says you have to go out there and take risks. You have to go out there and be ready to fail. You have to hustle. You have to have grit. Everyone knows this. But that's like saying to a musician, a beginner musician, play with feeling. Or to an actor, go out there and just be yourself on stage. Yeah, that's nice for the person saying it, but it's almost useless. And I don't know what it's like for women. I've never been a woman. But as a guy, you go out on a date and people are like, just be yourself. I'm like, what else could I do? That's totally unhelpful. All it does is help you feel better about giving me advice that I can't really use. Mm-hmm. So how do people learn things? Well, they learn by doing things. And how we teach music is my biggest analogy for how to teach, how to lead, how to be entrepreneurial. And I always have to point out, leadership, if you think leadership is like the guy in the corner office telling people what to do, and you think entrepreneurship is pitching venture capitalists like on Shark Tank, that is such a tiny subset of these fields. And what I'm teaching is the social and emotional skills of leadership. So in leadership, that would be empathy, compassion, listening, making people feel comfortable, sharing their vulnerabilities, connecting those vulnerabilities to the task, being aware, being self-aware, things like that. In entrepreneurship is taking initiative, taking responsibility, behaving in ways so that people share their problems with you so that you can solve those problems, listening, attracting people to be on a team, things like that. And that stuff is applicable broadly. I mean, a lot of my clients who come to me because they want to leave a company, they start developing the skills and they realize they can be entrepreneurial. They can get a project that I own without leaving the company. I can go to my manager and say, this is a project that I've come up with and I'd like to work on it. And these are the resources I need. And they don't have to leave. And so I've had plenty of people who come to me and they say, Josh, I want to leave my company. I hate it. And they come back to me after a while. They develop these social skills, these emotional skills. They create relationships with their managers that they never thought they could have. They're actually leading the person who has authority over them because leadership and authority are different. And they realize, like, I didn't want to file with the state. I didn't want to find out how to get benefits packages for employees. I just wanted ownership.
Well, I mean, that's really, really insightful because you can have that same predicament as an entrepreneur where you feel enslaved to your own business and you feel like you don't actually own your business because you're like, your calendar or your day or your projects are just you are a victim of your client's needs, or you don't get to have that, that autonomy that a lot of people like see over the fence at entrepreneurs, and they say, oh, the grass is greener over there because they get to do what they want. Well, not every entrepreneur gets to do what they want because they unintentionally victimize themselves with their own business.
Yeah, likewise.
So if you're in that situation and you feel kind of trapped by your situation, how can you find that autonomy?
Yeah, I mean, the freedom is more mental freedom. If you read Thoreau's Civil Disobedience, or you read about Gandhi in jail, or Martin Luther King in Letter from Birmingham jail, it's like they're more free in that environment than they were out there. And that's these social and emotional skills that I'm talking about. Likewise, you can be in a corporation and feel more free. So going back to the sales copy for you,
okay, sure,
is that the way to learn those things is through practice and rehearsal. And everyone knows if someone wants to learn how to play piano, it starts with scales and you move up to other things. If you want to learn how to play basketball, you start with dribbling exercises and you eventually work up. And when you see Michael Jordan do the most amazing spin, crazy move, he never practiced that exact move. He practiced the basics, the fundamentals, but he practiced them so much that he was completely fluent. He could do things that were natural to him because he practiced more than anybody else. He practiced fully. And if you want people to learn a performance-based skill, something that's active and social and expressive and emotional, you have to give them simple, I don't know if you have to, but it certainly works to give them simple things that they practice and they face and they overcome social and emotional challenges. First, they have to play at all. Even hearing themselves is kind of scary. Then they get that down and then they have to play for you. And then eventually maybe they'll play for their parents if it's kids. Eventually they may play, Giant Stadium or Carnegie Hall. But there's many, 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 many little steps. And that's why my book has so many exercises, because each exercise, the big jumps is where anxiety happens. That's where the fear comes in. Little jumps, not so bad. Carnegie Hall isn't so scary to play if the last place you played just before it was Lincoln Center or whatever's the next thing just below Carnegie Hall. And that one's not so hard if the thing you played before that was just like the Beacon Theater or whatever. I don't know what the hierarchy of places to play is.
Yeah, but I definitely I akin bravery to encourage to a spiral, and that every time you practice something, the spiral gets a little bit bigger. So, you see somebody who's done something brave, like, a traditional bravery that we think of is like saving somebody from a burning building. But if somebody who's a firefighter just saved somebody from a burning building, then that's not as brave of a feat for them because they do that stuff every day, right? But seeing a Joe Schmo go in there and jump in and save a kid from a burning building, that's a lot more brave because our expectations are different for that person and their circumstances. So when you look at yourself and compare yourself to somebody else who is like either ahead of you or you don't know their full story or whatever, and they're doing something really crazy and really brave, the important thing to realize is that your own spiral of bravery might be smaller than theirs, but they were in the same spot you were previously.
Yeah, I love the analogy. I guess for me, come to think of it, I've used like a helix. So in my physics background, I think more 3D, I guess, I don't know. But yeah, it's in one way, you're coming back around and doing the same things over and over again, but each time you've changed and each time you've grown. So in your case, the circle gets a bit longer, a bit bigger radius.
Yeah.
In my case, you move up in in the Z direction. And yeah, and you have to keep doing it over and over and over again. And people look at people who keep repeatedly doing stuff and like, why do you do that? Why don't you go out and have fun? And the freedom that you get from that, you're expanding the way most people say it is like you're expanding your comfort zone until what used to be scary is no longer scary. What used to be unthinkable is now scary. And then eventually the unthinkable becomes scary. The scary becomes possible. The possible becomes I've already done it. I've already done it becomes that's fun and freedom. I think freedom is what we get. And that's why you have people, I'm sure you have your students practice a lot. And I have my students practice a lot. The one thing is that, I don't know if this is going to sound too full of myself or something, but before me, nobody had the equivalent of scales or dance footwork or tennis ground strokes for leadership. And people would teach people, like there's lots of classes, there's like improv for leaders and orchestral conducting for leaders. I think it's great because it's experiential. But leaders don't really need to know how to conduct an orchestra as much as, I mean, Xander's, I don't know if you, like Ben Xander wrote a book on it, and he's like,
I love his work. It's so fun to listen to, just because I have a orchestral background, right? So I get everything he's saying.
So, and for you to learn orchestral conducting is like really useful. For the average person who's like starting their company or trying to get promoted or starting to organize their community to do something, or they want to have a better relationship with their husband or their wife or their kids, whatever. Orchestral conducting is like, it's interesting, but what do you do when it goes well? Do you learn more of it? Well, the way I look at it, leadership, the practice of leadership, and again, this doesn't have to be at a company. It doesn't have to be like telling people, it's not telling people what to do. There's more than enough things that you can draw from there that are the practice of leadership. And if you practice them, then you learn the skills and you can apply them all over the place. And it kills me when people say, oh, well, how are you going to convince someone to do this or that? I'm like, convincing is not effective. To me, I use as a synonym, when someone says convince, I substitute the words provoke, debate. And I think to try to convince someone logically is much more, it provokes debate. It's not a perfect example, but it's pretty close. There's a few substitutions like that I find, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's you. Before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about the election and how that's probably one of the main reasons why, or that convincing element is probably one of the main reasons why there was so much controversy around both sides, because they were each trying to convince each other. They were each trying to provoke debate as opposed to lead each other in an organic and authentic kind of way.
Yeah, I think they weren't trying to provoke debate. They were provoking debate.
Yeah.
And actually more digging in of heels. And yeah, I mean, I was talking also, so these people have missed the best, or a really good part of our conversation beforehand. I wrote this piece that was basically saying, maybe you're right. He's got 4 years. I don't know, maybe there's some Trump supporters listening, but for those who weren't, he has 4 years. You keep calling his supporters racist and sexist. Let's say in some abstract sense, you're right. They don't think you're right. And when they go in the voting booth, our democracy is based on you can vote for whatever reason you want. And do you want to give him another 4 years? Because that's what you're doing. And maybe you're right, but what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get the other people to dig in their heels more, for them to listen to you less? And getting back to...
So your answer is, rather than provoking debate, perhaps a more fruitful method is to just have conversation and listen to each other. Because you were saying one of the best ways to do this, or to go about all of this, is to figure out, for instance, my family members, what in their life would, prompt them to care about recycling. Meet them at that place. Have a conversation at that point.
I would even make it less like, not what do they care about, what would make them care about recycling? What do they care about?
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes you'll find that you cannot possibly connect what they care about to what you want done, and you may have to move on to someone else. But I rarely find that to be the case. Most of the time, people care about the same things that everybody cares about. That's why, I've never heard someone say an emotion that I've never felt at some point. People want to protect their loved ones. They want to be recognized for their contributions. They want to have some sense of making the world a better place. There's lots of things that are these universal emotions that you can empathize. When you connect on them, you empathize with the person empathizes with you. Listening is not such an easy thing to do. It's very easy to not talk and process the words that people are saying. Listening is another story. And the exercises that I have on listening come much later. They're later in the exercises. It's much easier to get access to yourself at the beginning. That's why I start with most of the exercises at the beginning, partly because you have access to yourself, partly so that by working on personal things, you don't have to worry about being judged and making mistakes and things like that. You can work up to those things. Listening comes less from trying to listen and more from having listened and gotten a sense of reward and having a purpose for the listening that will give you something to listen for. And then people find themselves, I'm talking too abstractly because I'm talking about exercises that come later. But if I can tell you what to listen for, and if you listen for those things, then you'll be able to influence somebody. you'll start doing it. And the more you do it, then it becomes second nature.
The first Barenaked Bravery Challenge was in May of this year, and it was a total success. And I cannot stress how inspiring it is to dive into a pool of you brave people with a bunch of other folks doing exactly the same thing. And I want to make sure that you're signed up for the next 5-day Barenaked Bravery Challenge. That is, if you're up for it. So what happens is individually, each challenger picks a specific area of life, business, creativity, relationships, whatever, an area that you know you need to be brave in. Then going one step further, picking a specific tangible task for that week. So this could be finally getting around to doing your taxes. It could be knowing that you have some difficult conversations coming up. It could be even as simple as doing a different kind of exercise that week just to mix things up and experience something different. It could be getting back online and going on a date. Whatever you choose, big or small, as a group, with all the other challengers, we go through some of the basics of bravery together. And each of these 5 days will have a really simple assignment aimed at exploring and building bravery in your chosen area. So what you'll find is that doing these little mini baby steps individually and at the same time as other folks, these baby steps are so easy, and you end up wanting to take bigger steps than you think you might. I promise. And by the end of the week, you'll have a much better understanding of how you can be brave and apply this bravery in a really tangible way to the rest of your life too. So participation in the challenge is free, completely free. However, I want to be sure that you get in on the list before you miss the next challenge, which is coming up soon. So just go to barenakedbravery.com/challenge. Again, that's barenakedbravery.com/challenge, and you can sign up and you'll get prompted to do all the next steps. And I will see you guys in there. I'm really, really excited about implementing some of those exercises that you've got in your book, because I think it's powerful stuff. I want to deviate a wee bit, because one of the things I definitely wanted to ask you about is North Korea.
Oh yeah.
You've been twice, and now this has almost nothing to do with bravery, although it probably has everything to do with bravery. What the hell is it like over there?
So North Korea is, it's a crazy place. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is it was a cold fall day as the clock struck 13. I forget the opening line of 1984. It's like 1984, except real, except you're there. And everyone's going around. They're human beings just like you and me. But, every now and then you'll go to a public place and there's a loudspeaker that's just, I don't know what it's saying. It's in North Korean, or it's in Korean, but it's like authoritarian, like, do what you're told. This is the way things are. You can only go to where they allow you to go. But the places that you're allowed to go, it's, you can tell that you see these buildings and all painted really nice, and there's a flower pot in every window. And you're like, I know on the other side of the building, it's falling apart. And it's a facade, they let you see this facade. The facade is really amazing. And no one who goes there has any belief that like we're seeing a representative part of North Korea. And I can also tell you that I don't think anyone who goes there thinks by going there, it's not going to make it any more entrenched. I mean, in fact, most places, this is the one place in the world that you want to become a tourist trap. You don't want like a beautiful sandy beach somewhere that's, the wonders of nature. You don't want that to become a tourist trap, because then it's going to get overrun and messed up, and it's going to get all a part of the rest of the world. In North Korea, I think it might be better if it got changed into a place that was connected with the rest of the world.
Wait, so go back a little bit. How did you find yourself there?
Oh, that's easy.
You've been multiple times, right?
Yeah. One of my early blog posts on it was a friend of mine, Jordan Harbinger. You probably know him from the podcast world. We've been friends for 10 or 15 years. And one time he emailed me I think it was my birthday, and he said, happy birthday. And he goes, by the way, I'm going to North Korea. Be jealous. And I've done enough things with Jordan to know if he suggests doing something, do it. So I think we were on the phone a little while afterward, and he said, do you want to go to North Korea? I was like, okay, my mind was saying, you don't have time, you don't have money, there's no way you can go. And my mouth said yes. And I really had no idea how I'd make it happen. I didn't know until later that it's actually very easy to go to North Korea for anyone except a South Korean, that they want your money more than they want. They're pretty practical about that. They want your money. If you come, they got your money. If you don't, they don't. So what was it? It was about $1,200, $1,500. It was in euros, I forget. You just have to go to Beijing, and then you have to have a double entry visa into China. And then there's a company there that works a lot with the North Korean government department for tourism. And it's all, you just pay a big lump sum. You get on the flight, oh my God, this plane it's like duct tape holding this thing together. No. And yeah, I mean, the plane was literally sweating in the sense of like on the inside, the air conditioner, however it worked, it was like water is like collecting on the inside of the plane. It's like dripping down. And then the flight attendants are like, everything in North Korea has to be like, we're all happy. So they're like happily doing this thing that you're like, this is not what a plane is supposed to be like. Nonetheless, it flies and you figure, okay, so you get there and then there's a lot of really amazing monuments in Pyongyang. And so you go around they're all like big and amazing and phenomenal. And there's great stories of how the US started the Korean War and how the great leader did all this and that and all this stuff. And it's really amazing. And it's a cultural exploration that I can't think of another place where you get a similar experience. I mean, maybe Cuba, but not really. I mean, that's a different experience. Nonetheless, the people there are people just like you and me. They have the same DNA and so forth, the superficial differences there. And so you see people in a different environment doing things their way. And that ultimately, the biggest value for me, the two biggest values, one was being there with great people who were going to have a great time. And we had a great time. And partly because we brought a bunch of alcohol and cigarettes, and that gets you extra access. And then the other thing is learning about yourself. One of the big lessons I learned was they have pictures of the great leaders in every public place. And everywhere you go, there's Kim Il-sung and there's Kim Jong-il and now there's Kim Jong-un. And I started asking myself, what does that do to have these people everywhere? Everywhere you go, these faces like Big Brother are looking at you. And that led me to realize, or to suppose that they probably tune it out. So if they tune it out, they're not noticing it. I wonder if I tune anything out. I wonder what I don't notice in my life. And so there's lots of middle steps, but it was when I passed the one billboard that I remember seeing in the whole country and thinking, oh, it's so weird, like seeing a billboard when there's no billboards around. And then I thought, Times Square? I mean, I think of advertising. I don't know, like I'm like, I can see your apartment right now. I don't see many logos.
This is my music studio.
Okay, I'm used to seeing logos around. Like if I look outside, or if I even look at my apartment, there's a lot of logos everywhere. There's a lot of advertising. Yeah. I tune it out. And I wonder how much how is my world of consumption and so forth, how has that just become a part of me that I don't realize it and I don't notice all these things going around? And so, yeah, the next time I was in Times Square, I'm looking around and it made me think a lot of the big squares where they had the giant 60-foot statues of their great leaders. And by no means am I trying to equate the United States and North Korea, not at all. But it's hard not to see things in a different way after you've seen that. And people here, when Kim Jong-il died and we saw the pictures, the videos of the people crying and so forth. First of all, I saw people crying there. And I was there when Kim Jong-un first spoke on TV. And we were in the hotel where all the foreigners are allowed to stay. And once he went on, everything stopped. Every North Korean was watching. And they're really overcome with emotion. And it's not fake. It's genuine emotion in the same way that people care about stuff here that they'd be like, what do you care about? Like your brand is what, huh? People care about these icons that we make out of some celebrities and stuff like that. And I think people dismiss them as brainwashed and somehow they've been deprived of their humanity. But that's one of the biggest things I saw.
The fact that I cry at a Super Bowl commercial doesn't mean I'm not human. It means I'm very much human. It just means that whoever's doing the Super Bowl commercial is acknowledging the fact that I am a human and have emotions.
Yeah. And so North Korea gives you a chance to see what it means to be human from a vantage point that is virtually otherwise unavailable. Mm-hmm. I don't want North Korea to stay the way it is. I would like to change it. My first book that I wrote was a collection of blog posts that was like my view of North Korea from a systems perspective. And I don't see a whole lot of ways to change it. No one else does either because it's not changing. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that going there makes it worse. I do think there's a chance of it improving. And in the meantime, it's an amazing place. And I recommend going with great people.
Okay. Duly noted. It may or may not go on my bucket list. It probably will. It will. Let's talk a little bit more about this comfort, discomfort stuff, because you have done a lot of things. I'm going to read off some of your bio. You don't mind. You have 5 Ivy League degrees. You've studied under a Nobel Prize winner. You have helped build an X-ray observational satellite for NASA. You have 6 patents. You have worked internationally for many things. You have been on TV. All of these things are really big, awesome, cool, gold star stickers for you. But what they represent to me is a lot of uncomfortable moments.
Well, all right, this is the first time I'm going to say what I'm about to say, that I didn't put it together. Before a certain point, virtually all the things I did were solo things. Getting a PhD is, you got to publish stuff, but it's really like you're working on your own. And now I look back at those things as, there were a lot of things. I mean, I thought I was going to be the next Einstein. That's what I wanted. That was my goal. And that would be helping the world. But really it was self-indulgent. I liked it and I wanted to do it. And I took for granted that others would value it, but I did it because I liked it. And in the sports that I played then, when I played Ultimate, I was trying to be better. The team aspect of it was lost to me, and sadly. And what I do now is much more about contributing to others and helping others. Of course, I love what I do. So a lot of those achievements were they weren't that uncomfortable in the sense of, like, getting a PhD, going to graduate school was really hard because I was getting low grades for the first time. And my classmates had studied significantly more physics and math than I had. So they were way ahead of me, and I couldn't compete with them. It took me a long time to catch up. That's a different scary than, there are times when you're first starting a company and I had to go and present to potential investors. That was scary in a way, the scariness of performing in front of an audience that I didn't do before. And that was really scary. And I was as scared as anyone. And I had disasters as much as anyone. And that led me to realize, that's why I teach leadership, is that it's how do you overcome these things? And it's not go out there and do your best, or you can do it, or, I support you. That's for the person saying it. That's not for the person receiving it.
I would also add, I say this all the time on the show. So who's a regular listener, they're laughing because I say this all the time. It's not feel the fear and do it anyways.
So what is it?
So my thesis is that it is acknowledge your limitations and your constraints and use the friction of the fear to lean into the direction that you want to go.
So that to me is I can't disagree with that. I can't act on it. Me personally, I can't act on it though. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to lean into fear. To me, it's develop the skills to do these things and keep practicing the skills. Mm-hmm. So if a weightlifter moves up to heavier weights, not because the weights get lighter, but because he or she gets stronger. Mm-hmm. And the way to develop physical muscles is through practice and repetition, rehearsal. And the way to develop mental muscle is also the same way. And so when I went to business school and I took my leadership classes, they were giving me an intellectual challenge. It was, read psychology papers and read case studies and debate the case studies and listen to lectures. Okay, so intellectually I was learning intellectual stuff. Okay, but most leaders, most successful people, it's rare that just intellectual knowledge gets them far. Because generally, really interesting projects that people love for their lives on a life level don't involve just them and their two hands. They involve other people. And you want other people involved. That's social and emotional stuff. So if you look at the behavior of what we teach in school, the word I come up with most is compliance. It's teaching compliance, which is not effective for influencing other people to comply. And giving people like little exercises to get them to try new things in a safe, protective way, but a little bit more than they normally would have. Then the next thing is a little bit more than that. And the next thing is a little bit more than that. And eventually you crave for me, the first podcast that I did, I was really freaked out and scared. And one of the exercises in my book is the authentic voice exercise, which is to speak. It comes later after a bunch of other ones, but you speak without the filter. But that's not how I say it. It's to speak the inner monologue that in an earlier exercise, you wrote this thing down. You wrote down these words going on inside your head. Now you're aware of that. Well, that voice is going on nonstop. As far as I can tell, it doesn't stop. I mean, maybe when I sleep, but basically whenever I'm awake, it's there. That means I have access to something that I can say that's really me, that's more me than anything else. And so after writing it for a while and doing a couple of exercises that get it out, people have a facility with working with that inner voice. And so this exercise is to speak that voice without filtering it. But I don't say without filtering it, because that's to say don't do X is not very effective, but to say what you wrote down before, say that. And probably people listening to this are like, well, that's too much. It is too much if you haven't done the earlier exercises, but if you do the earlier exercises, no. So I've been using the podcast to put that practice into practice. Mm-hmm. And I love it. Like, I'm speaking more openly than I ever had before, but I was just as afraid as anyone. I mean, I can tell you, when I was in business school and I did the class play, I was so freaked out. I hadn't been on stage since third grade. In third grade, I was kicked off of the play for misbehaving. And I was misbehaving because I didn't want to do it. And I was like, great, now I don't have to do it. And so third grade, I would have been 8 years old, I guess. So business school, I was like 35. So between 8 years old and 35, I never went on stage, never in front of an audience. And the reason I was doing Folly was the class play was that I came up with an idea for a script. And, nerdy people like The Onion, we can write funny stuff. We just don't want to do it. So they said, all right, we like your sketch, the sketch that you wrote, because I submitted it. They said, we like it, but you have to be in, we only take scripts from people who are in it. And if you're in it, you got to be on stage. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll say yes, but then I'll drop out in the last minute when it's too late for them to not do my script, but they'll just find someone to fill in for me. But then I went to all these rehearsals because I had to. And eventually I was like, all right, I'll do it. And before I went up on stage, there's 500 people in the audience, of whom I know many, many of them. And I hear they're doing the lines, and my cue to come on stage is coming up. And by the way, I did not get my lines right once in all of the practices, because I thought to get spontaneous, you should not practice, which is totally backward. Now that I've taken acting lessons, I know some technique. So it's coming up to mine, and I'm nervous, right? My palms sweating, sweat on my brow. And I'm like, I'm ready to puke, no joke. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And by the way, there's one of the sketches that was with me in it. I was playing a professor on a panel. And so there's the props where there's a table, and on the table is my name card with the professor's name. And surreptitiously, before the play, I put my lines on the back of the card, as if the audience is not going to see someone on stage, like looking down at the card and reading them. Like, I don't know who I thought I was kidding. So anyway, I'm ready to puke. But I've rehearsed enough. And then my line comes to get on stage, and I climb up the stairs and I go out. And what do you know? I practiced enough that I just said the lines, and, we're not acting students, so no one's expecting it to be great. And it goes great. And the audience laughs and applauds. And honestly, actually, the hour or two after that, there are two productions. So that evening, my feet did not touch the ground. It was possibly the best couple hours of my life, that I can't believe how good it felt. And I can tell you that an experience like that, now that was a big jump. Luckily, I had all those rehearsals on the way. But an experience like that, when I teach, I try to give people lots of little things to work up to that, to make it not so anxiety causing. I don't think people need to puke to become the effective leaders that they want to be. But that's what does it. Yes, it's scary beforehand, but the elation afterward is worth it. Mm-hmm. And if you can lower, you can lower the scariness in order to make lots of little steps instead of one giant step. And then you develop the skill. And mm-hmm. I'm now practicing it with you right now. And I love what I'm doing. And I can tell you that before that, there's no way I would do this.
Oh yeah. And that's part of using the friction, is practicing things. You're doing something a little bit uncomfortable, just a little bit uncomfortable. and going in the direction that you think you might want to go. And you touched a little bit onto something, one of the tricks that I love to introduce people to.
You like throwing up too?
Well, no, definitely do not. But one of my favorite tricks in leaning into bravery is, if the commitment to do something scary is one of the biggest, things that's holding you back, the commitment, then don't commit to running the marathon, but just try doing the everyday things that you would normally do if you were going to commit. Because then usually what ends up happening is you start to see, oh, wow, well, if I'm going to actually do this marathon or this scary thing coming up, but I've already done all the steps I need to do to just take the next step, right? So then the choice to sign up for the marathon is actually easy because you've already done the training.
Yeah, and what you're saying has this essential truth in it. I believe it's a truth that there would be no appeal unless there was something in your life that connected. So you have something that gives you access. Find that. And maybe that's what you're saying is that you find that. And there's something about stretching that I think is relevant here. When you stretch your body, the reason you do it is to loosen something up and to be more lithe and to be more supple. And the way to find it is you have to find where the tension is. That means you have to recognize the tension and you feel it. And if you stretch as hard as you possibly can, you'll cause pain.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't stretch. Actually, stretching causes tension. And that tension is how you can release it. And it's no accident that the word tension talks about a physical thing, but it's the same thing mentally.
And emotionally and relationally.
Yeah, emotions. And when I talk about like freedom or testing yourself, it's usually intellectually, emotionally, socially. These are the domains where we want. And what we create is intimacy. What we create is vulnerability or the comfort in allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. And that spiral you keep moving farther and farther out in the spiral, and you become more and more comfortable with doing what you would anyway. I was on the subway and I saw someone reading Us Weekly, People Magazine, one of these things. And it shows a bunch of people, a bunch of superstars, and they're like walking down the street doing regular stuff. And the headline across the top says, they're just like us. And celebrities and these people, we like them most when they're doing what we do too. When you get put on stage or you get a microphone put in front of you, you often think, oh, now I got to do that thing that other people do, but I'm not good at it, so I'll try harder. And that's not very genuine. The thing about being genuine is it doesn't come from trying to be genuine or trying to be authentic. It comes from practicing and rehearsing until all that crap that's on top, every time you do it, you learn, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. That's what I did because I felt like I was supposed to. All right, I can practice a bit more and I can jettison that and get rid of that. And then you get, oh, there's this other thing that I do. Okay, and then eventually you behave in a way that feels natural to you. And the instruction, be yourself, is ineffective, but the instruction, do the best you can, it's
well. I mean, that's a really good, very precise example of that. What you just said is that I have, say, a classical piece of music tells you in Italian to play a piece in a certain way, or your very wise and totally with it teacher tells you to use a certain fingering pattern or whatever. So you have this very precise thing. And a lot of times I have these students, these like rebel with a cause students who are like, oh, but I'm just improvising. I'm going to make up my own fingerings. And my response is always, great, that's fine. You can use whatever fingerings you want to do. But my intention is to teach you all of the fingerings and to let you pick the fingering that you think is the easiest and the most appropriate for the situation. Not just because you decided to pull it out of a hat, but because it's actually the right one for the circumstances that you're trying to use. So if somebody says, has a qualm with the fingerings or the way that I'm asking them to teach it, I go, great, that's fine. You can play it that way. You're the way you want to play it, as long as you can prove to me that you can with ease play it all the other ways too, and that your way is still your favorite. And then they usually go like, oh, okay.
Yes. Do you know Martha Graham?
Yes.
Do you know this quote that I'm going to read to you from her?
Please.
So for people who don't know, Martha Graham she was for dance what Picasso was in the 20th century. Like before, it was all about beauty that you could see very clearly, and they found a beauty that was different. And for her, it was more modern dance and not being on point. And so dance of her style is not as big as, visual arts. So you don't see it. Most people don't know her as much. And so this quote, my file of quotes gets smaller and smaller all the time because I'm increasing the signals to noise. And this is my number one quote. And she says it about dancers, but you could easily substitute leader or virtually anything else of the fields, these creative, social, emotional, expressive, emotional, performance-based fields. Okay. The dancer is realistic. His craft teaches him to be. Either the foot is pointed or it is not. No amount of dreaming will point it for you. This requires discipline, not drill, not something imposed from without, but discipline imposed by you yourself upon yourself. Your goal is freedom, but freedom may only be achieved through discipline. In the studio, you learn to conform, to submit yourself to the demands of your craft so that you may finally be free. To me, I saw it during a documentary and I was like, stop, rewind, record, or play. And I copied it all down. And then it turns out it's all over the internet. The idea that freedom comes from conforming and submitting to the untrained outside observer seems the opposite. Isn't conforming and doing what you're told the opposite of freedom? And yet that is where freedom comes from. And she just says it better than anyone that I've ever come across. And I keep coming back to it because that's why I do the daily habits that are challenging that I do, because I want freedom, and that's where it comes from. And that's why I seek out experts to learn from them, to learn from what they learn from. And when someone says, I'm just going to be me, and I can't be like that. It's like, well, there may be people like that, but the more that I learn of people who I want to emulate, they've gone through this path.
It's true. It is so true. And I think, discipline is one of the hidden secrets, or not very highly discussed at least, to being successful or leaning into the things that you want and the way that you want to live your life. And you're spot on. Spot on. This has been fantastic.
Spot on for quoting someone else who said it better than I ever could.
Hey, but that still works for me. Thank you so much, Joshua. This has been so fantastic. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but we will have all the links to everything. And if you guys want more of Joshua, all of the links are going to be in the show notes. So I would love to have you back sometime. This has been fantastic. Thank you for being here with us.
I'd love to be back. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was a lot of podcasters have, I don't know, maybe they have more of an agenda of a certain way they want to do things. That's great. I like it. This one, you probably have an agenda too, but it's probably something more about your audience.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you again. Thank you again. It's been so fantastic. Beyond the always available to you Bravery bundle of goodies available at barenakedbravery.com, your brave takeaway from today's show is to do a free write session where you are completely uncensored and perhaps more unhinged than usual. Do that for a quick 20 minutes and then read it aloud. Not with the intention of doing anything except experiencing what it's like to hear yourself out loud be an uncensored version of yourself. That is your challenge this week. Go for it and let us know in the Barenaked Bravery Facebook group what it was like. What did you notice? How did it feel? We being Joshua and I and all the rest of the Barenaked Bravery listeners, we would love to hear about your favorite parts of today's Barenaked Bravery. You can find Joshua Spodek and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all the other places. If you post about the show, go ahead and tag us so that we can cheer you on and see what you're up to. And that's our show this week. Thank you again for listening. We've put all the links in the show notes for today's episode, so be sure to visit us for that. Just visit barenakedbravery.com. And if you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as Joshua and I enjoyed making it for you, then please give us a review, rate the show in your iTunes desktop app or your podcast app on your phone. It really does help. If you're digging the music in today's episode, that is because it's brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing, a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. To find more about all the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, go to barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. I'm totally looking forward to being with you next time. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for the next episodes. We have some really great things in store for you. Until then, I have one message for you. It's this: be yourself. Be vulnerable, be imaginative, be intuitive and improvisational, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.